Hey, welcome everybody to this month's Intentional Success webinar. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. I'm grateful that you are here. So glad to see so many familiar faces in the live participation. If you're watching the recording, I'm glad you could make it as well. Don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions. So I'm Tom Stimson. I'm a business coach from the live events industry. I work exclusively in the live events industry, working with production companies. Many of my clients are on here. If you come to Jumpstart in Atlanta, you'll meet a lot of them there. You can learn more about what I do, or just reach out and let's have a little chat. Today, we're going to talk about cost data. And you hear me talk about costs a lot. I'm going to try and convert this into strategic terms. We very often we talk about cost and replacement cost in order to determine our pricing, but what's the point of having pricing? We price so that we can negotiate, so we can decide when and how we want to win or not win opportunities. So we want to talk about going from an understanding of our cost position to making a strategic decision about how we're going to leverage that information. So there'll be some interesting ideas in here for you, as I'm sure there always are. All right. So now why am I having this webinar? Well, there's usually, as I'm putting together the calendar for the year of the webinars, there's always something that's kind of triggered it. But the big thing I want you to take away today is that if you understand your costs, right, you can finally learn how to price, and that's very important. Pricing is not an exercise of just putting numbers on a page and massaging them until the customer is happy. Pricing is always strategic, right? Economics is strategic, okay? We have supply and we have demand. Any money that you could have earned and you didn't is a failure, okay? Any money that you could have earned and didn't win and you could have won is a failure. Taking a job that is below what it is worth to you is a failure. Everybody looks at their costs differently. Everybody assesses worth differently. And that's why this is so hard to understand. So I'm going to try and unpack this for you. I want you to have a better understanding of what costs are, but we're going to start with the biggest cost of all, and that is overhead. And I just want to set this aside because the costs I'm going to talk about in the rest of the webinar are really about costs of goods sold. It's the costs of the things that we do for our customers. And everything we do, everything we touch has a cost. Even if the client doesn't pay us a penny, there are still costs related. But overhead costs are the costs that we agreed to as the stakeholders that we are going to invest in this business, whether we have revenue or not. Overhead are the costs you incur whether you have any revenue or not. So it's the cost of infrastructure, talent, knowledge to acquire business and arrange for the delivery of whatever it is that you sold. So there is so many elements to this, right? In the balanced model, where we have broken our company up into a selling team, a planning team, and an administration team, okay, they comprise your overhead. There is no execution or very little execution in this model. And if there is, we treat it as a cost, as an execution cost, as a fourth group. But we need to sell, we need to plan, we need to procure, we need to provide information, documentation, we need to prep the orders, we need to make sure that the execution team has everything they need to do a good job, and then we need to administrate the company. These are your overhead costs. So it's rent, it's depreciation, it's cell phones, it's internet, it's insurance, it's all those things that you have to run a business. The lower your overhead, the less revenue you need to charge to make a profit. Your threshold of profit is lower if your overhead is lower. So keeping our overhead down is important, especially in scalable organizations, because we don't necessarily have a consistent, reliable revenue stream in our industry. And even if we do, we will make more money if we learn how to manage our overhead. But let's talk about the relationships between price and cost, because I want to get to this cost thing very quickly. Ultimately, most of you want to talk about price. The question everybody asks me is, Tom, what should my price for this be? What are other people charging? And it's a sincere question, but it's the wrong question because everybody's cost basis is different. Everybody's price is going to be different. But in our industry, our prices are really just kind of made up, right? You look around, you see what other people are charging and think, well, hey, I can get that. And that becomes your price. And then sometimes it just never ever changes again. So there are two approaches to oversimplify this a bit. There's two approaches to managing this relationship. The intentional approach, and the one that I teach, is that the cost of something plus the margin you need to make on it equals your price. What we tend to do in our industry, and what most of you have done, and what I grew up doing, was price minus a discount. So a made up price minus a made up discount minus whatever variable costs I happen to incur will generate a gross profit. And in that case, gross profit is a result instead of a fixed goal. Gross profit is accidental. The actual number is accidental. It's a byproduct that doesn't have a lot of predictability. If we price intentionally from cost plus margin, that margin becomes the gross profit. Now, there are variances on this. There's timing issues and stacking issues and multiple jobs. There's busy season and slow season. But the fundamental truth is pricing from cost is going to give you a more accurate return on your revenue. Pricing from a retail number minus a discount, minus pricing adjustments, and then whatever variable costs that you incur, okay, that's kind of a guessing game. And while we can be predictive when we sell, at the end of the day, there's nothing to say that particular job is going to be anywhere close to what we predicted when you look at all of the jobs brought together. So first lesson here is that there is effectively no such thing as a variable cost. Even though we throw the word variable out all the time, we use it in accounting all the time, okay? There are simply costs you failed to determine in advance, right? There are no variable costs. There are just costs we failed to determine in advance. So the big takeaway from all of this is that we need to get better at determining what our costs are going to be in advance, because it's going to allow us to make better decisions so that we can profitably acquire the business we want to acquire and ignore the business that we need to ignore. I'm going to go back in time a little bit, and this is I love this story, and I don't tell it very often. But in 2001, the year 2000 was actually a great year for the company I worked for. It represented, the 11th year of double-digit growth. We had never had a year where we sold less than the year prior from the foundation of the company. Every year was bigger and bigger and bigger until 2001. 2000 was a fantastic year, record-breaking year, of course. In 2001, things got a little bit soft, and we kind of knew that it wasn't going to be as big a year as it was before, but it got really scary about April, well, just about this time of that year when I was doing the forecast for the rest of the year and found out that we had very little predictive activity going on for the fall. Normally, by April or May, we were booking crews into September and October, and we actually had almost no confirmed business. It wasn't even worth trying to schedule people because there just weren't enough jobs to even warrant the effort. And this was a warning sign. We immediately changed our pricing strategy for the fall. Any jobs that came in, we were discounting much more deeply. We were much more aggressively about them. Now, what we were seeing was beginning of a recession. Unfortunately, it got worse than that. And you remember September 11th, 2001, 9/11, Twin Towers came down, air travel stopped for ages. I can't remember how many weeks it was, but it was a very long time. All business events were canceled at least through the end of the year. That quarter's worth of business that we had scraped together in an already soft year just absolutely vaporized. One of our competitors, and I got a lot of respect for them doing this, but this was their plan. They went out to their clientele. We all had shows that, we had to give the client the money back. We had shows that were set up that we loaded back on the truck and drove home. We all have those stories. We had, vendors that we had to fight with about whether or not they were going to get paid, and we struggled to get paid. This company came out after the dust had settled and oh God, it's too soon. That was a bad metaphor. But after things had calmed down a little bit, and they said, look, guys, we know our industry's been in a tough spot. Here's what we're going to do. All of our equipment is free. We will do your show. Anything we own is free. If you'll pay the cost of trucking pass through, you'll pay the cost of travel pass through, and you'll pay our labor flat rate, no overtime. Okay. We will do your shows for you. They were basically doing shows at cost. And it seemed horrible at the time as a competitor. It's like, oh my goodness. But these people absolutely understood their cost basis, their overhead basis, because they realized that if they could book their flat labor rates and they had staff labor available, which they did, all of us had a lot of staff technicians in those days, that job was 100% gross profit. Even if they were only getting a third of the price that they were getting before, or a third of what the job was worth, it was all gross profit, which was going to offset their overhead. So it was a gutsy move. It was a pretty wise move from an economic standpoint, but they couldn't have done it if they understood what was going on. So even the labor they had to outsource, they need stagehands. Great. They were still making 30 or 40% gross profit on that. So these jobs that they were doing were actually pretty darn profitable given the circumstances. But to the buyer, they thought they were getting the deal of a century. And well, in fact, they were. Now, think about this. When these guys are putting together the quote for their client, do you think they cut corners on crew? Do they think they left any positions out or doubled up on one person, had them do the job of two people? Absolutely not. They put every single person it took to do that job well, because the last thing you want to do is lowball a job and screw it up because you didn't have enough of the right people on the job site. And because it was a profit center, the clients again thought they were getting a deal. They were happy to see all of these very inexpensive people, right? Because all the gear was free, bringing all the gear they could ever want to do the show. And everybody was happy. Everybody was having fun. How did it help? I don't know how it actually turned out for them. But the fact is, a quarter of a century later, I remember this story, and it's like I'm living it again today because it applies so much to what we're talking about in this webinar. So for those of you who must sell from price and take a discount off, you're okay. Don't worry. I'm going to help you. It's a very difficult change for most of us to move from a retail price minus a discount to any other kind of pricing model. No matter how much I implore you to do it, I know this is a tough sell, okay? But I keep pushing it because if you sell from price less discount, you are at a strategic disadvantage, right? You don't know the true gross profit of a job until all the bills come in, so you don't know how much room you actually have to negotiate. And when I show you how the numbers actually work, you're going to go, holy crap, you'll think of jobs that you could have won and why you could have won them, but you looked at the numbers the wrong way, okay? When you quote from price less discount, every line in your proposal looks negotiable, especially if you sell with line items. But even if you don't sell with line items, if you sell with groups or line mutes, you still look very, very negotiable, right? And then you're also at the mercy of changes in costs that are outside of your business. So what if you haven't updated your prices and all of a sudden you found out that, screens now cost twice what they used to, or the price of labor surprise has changed, right? All of a sudden you're in a situation where this job, which looked great when you sold it, suddenly looks horrible because you didn't anticipate, one, what your needs were going to be and who can, right? Or what they were going to cost because you were pricing based on old assumptions, okay? If you sell from price less discount, which I did for many years, you have to constantly update your cost data to verify your prices. Very few companies do that, right? You should be doing it, and certainly in a balanced model, in the scalable model of selling, planning, and administration, part of the feedback loop of those three spheres is that we live by cost data. We're constantly getting a feedback loop that tells us when we need to adjust our cost assumptions, and if we're selling from price, therefore our price assumptions, so that we can fulfill every order without worrying about the cost. All right. Now, if you always sell from cost, and many of you are starting to do that, I hear it more and more often. It's very gratifying. Thank you. Thank you if I've been a part of that. If I haven't been a part of that, thank you for doing it anyway, because you're helping other people see how important it is to do it. If you always sell from cost for that project, you have a calculated risk, you have a cost, and you have a profit margin that are all figured out in advance. Because in order to sell from cost, you have to take a snapshot in time of what is my current risk on this job, what are my current costs on this job, and how much profit margin can I afford to make. Notice what I said, afford to make, because sometimes you can afford to make a lot, and sometimes you can afford to make a little. Okay. How much profit can you afford to make? And that's going to inform you of what your sell price is. It's a much simpler formula than working from retail and trying to massage all the discounts and adjustments and assumptions that are built in behind all of that. When you think about cost, remember that that owned equipment that you have, that stuff that's in your warehouse, do not call it rental inventory. These are things that you have chosen to own because they reduce your cost basis when you execute. It's a financing decision. This is not an inventory for rental. You do shows for a living. Okay. You might have to rent gear, but you do not rent gear to your customers. You sell them a service, which is a finished show. Owning some of your own equipment reduce your cost of delivering that. Now, it may make you look important, may make you feel like you can give the client a better deal, make them feel like they are getting a better deal. Sure, there's lots of other strategic reasons to own equipment, but the fact of the matter is, owning equipment is a one-time opportunity. You can only rent it once at a time, right? So I'm going to use this example here that if you happen to own an LED wall that you know will cost just $10,000 if you sub-rent it, you can sell it for $10,000 because you don't expect to sub-rent it. You have it, right? And if you have talent and logistics at cost, $2,000 and $1,000 each, you can sell the job at $13,000 and make a ton of money, right? Or you can, look at this, sell below cost. What, Tom, how can we sell below cost? Of course you can sell. If $10,000 is your replacement cost, you can sell below replacement cost. The fact is that's $7,000 of gross profit because you own the LED and you have no expectation of needing to subrent it. Why not take this risk? And now you can actually sell talent and logistics at the right price, which means you're not devaluing what those things are worth, and you're not discounting them, because that is the cardinal sin. We discount equipment. We discount assets that we own. We do not discount things that have a hard cost, right? So now I can price this appropriately, still $13,000. I'll make the exact same gross profit. But when I look at all of my jobs together, my profit's actually going to increase, because not every job plays out exactly this way. And when you do sub-rent, you're never going to take a hit on talent and logistics because you're already priced under the assumption that you're going to sub-rent. And in fact, because we understand what our costs are, we will realize that we have an opportunity to make a lot more money. And I'll show you that example in just a minute. So remember, when we discount the right thing. Now, I say knowing what your cost that knowing what your costs are is a strategic advantage, right? If you don't understand your costs, if you can't put together cost knowledge in your head, then you better have it at your fingertips or have somebody else who can do it for you, because we can't quote a job without a cost estimate. We cannot do it properly and do it strategically and give ourselves the advantage that we need at the negotiating table if we don't understand what our costs are. Again, I got an example coming for you that's going to help nail this in. So in order for a cost to be an advantage, it has to be a known value, right? In the example I just showed you, the sub-rent cost on the LED, labor, and logistics was researched. On any given day, you can probably buy at a better price. You're probably not going to have to pay more unless it's an extraordinary circumstance, which is part of risk, right? So there's a small risk you would have to pay more, but there's a much more likely scenario where you're going to end up paying less. But the point is, it is a known value. That's what makes it an advantage. The amount of risk involved is also known. The owned LED you have in the example is lower risk than the labor or the logistics, right? It's a known quantity. You already have it. You're planning in advance. And if you had another job come up, you have the opportunity to price that job on its cost basis, which will probably be higher because now you know you're going to have to sub-rent an LED wall for one job or the other. So when you have overlapping jobs, it doesn't matter where it goes. You do the right thing for the company's bottom line. We don't worry about the individual job costs, but that tells us where we can negotiate, right? So we know what the risk is for the cost. And we also know that we're going to apply it one order at a time. I can't rent the same LED wall 3 times and price all 3 jobs the same way and then sort out who gets what later, because for each job I have a different cost basis and a different risk basis, which is why you need to understand cost every time you put a quote together. And trust me, it is not as complex or burdensome as you're thinking it is right now. So let's talk about the high margins you saw. You saw me put the talent and the logistics and put a 50% margin on them, which is a 100% markup. It's basically doubling the price. If it costs me $1,000, I need to sell it for $2,000. I don't discount this. I don't negotiate this number. This is the amount of profit and risk that you should be willing to deal with. Can it be a little bit higher, a little bit lower? Yes. Okay. But from my experience, this is a good starting point for 90% of you. Okay. You always have a cost to schedule, manage, and pay whatever resources you procure. So part of that 50% margin covers the overhead that it takes to procure it. It also covers the cost of paying for it, and it covers the risk that that cost might be higher, or if you don't procure wisely, that you have to give some money back because you put the wrong product or people onto the job. We don't want to do that. That's what our planning team does for a living. They're going to get the right tools and resources there. They're not going to make that kind of mistake. That doesn't mean it's not risky. And the more jobs you have going on, the smaller your resource pool it becomes relative to the jobs, which means you have more risk. So every time you add a job, your risk factors change. You with me? All right. Which kinds of brings us to this whole idea of seasonal pricing. Okay? Dynamic pricing, I also call it. Seasonal pricing is a scalable concept. Okay? It is pretty much on the sell side, it is the heart of scalability. You need to have a dynamic price because your costs and risk change all of the time. Okay? Your lead times change, which changes your risk, which changes your cost. A lot of variables here. So seasonal pricing is scalable because it means the more work we do, the more profit we should be able to make because we are factoring in the increased costs and the increased risk, which means an increased margin. So we're putting a higher margin on it when we're busier, when our risks are higher, right? When the elements of the formula change, the price can change, right? So if the risk changes, the price to your customer can change. Now, once you've sold the job, you're not going back and fiddling with prices. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. If in the point of working with the client through the job, if you can negotiate out some of the risk, Okay, that's going to allow you to sell at a better price if you're trying to get to a lower number. So when the client says, hey, I've only got $20,000 and you're at $25,000, and if you can come back and say, if you will remove this risk for me, you will take care of this, you will take care of this, okay, you will not make me take care of that, right? I can do it for $20,000. If you can pay me at this time instead of this time, I can do it for $20,000. If you can reduce my business risk for me, I'd be willing to do this for a lower price. Maybe you're taking out some capabilities as well. That also might be reducing your risk. Right? So again, we have to know what our costs are in order to do all of this. Now, because pricing is seasonal, your buy is also seasonal, right? So your costs are seasonal. Procurement is always monitoring cost changes. It's very possible that you could be extremely busy one month and nobody else in the industry is, and your cost for that period actually might be very low. Conversely, you may not be busy at all, but everybody else is, and your costs are very high. Okay? This is good information to have if you're walking into a situation where you know you're going to need to assume some outside costs. Your costs are going to change depending on what's going on in the industry. Now, when demand is low, adjust price. This is big, right? Many of you tell me that while you do have some busy times and you do have some good months, most of the time you feel like you're living from hand to mouth and you need every job that comes across your plate. Guess what? You can have every suitable job that comes across your plate. It's not that hard. I'm going to show you how to do it. But before we do that, we have to consider risk. Okay, what is risk worth? It's a concept. Risk is a concept. Everybody's sense of risk is different. And this is ultimately the stakeholders' call, the owner's call, senior management. Somebody has to determine what risk is worth in your business. The risk on owned equipment, if you own inventory, that risk is actually pretty low. I mean, it's probably the lowest risk we have, which is why so many of us choose to own equipment. It reduces our risk, which allows us to negotiate that price, which allows us to win jobs that are going to generate gross profit, right? It's something that we can control. The risk on outsourced labor and or logistics, which are services, is really medium. You would think it's high, but it's not. The fact is, you can hire professionals, you can work with reliable people and reliable companies, and you're going to have very medium risk because the supplier is assuming a lot of the risk, right? If they let you down, they know they're not going to get paid. So they're working very hard to make sure that your risk is minimized, right? So the risk that you will mess something up, however, is very high. And I don't care how good you are, how great your processes are, there is always the underlying risk that a human error is going to slip through. Somebody's going to have a bad day. Somebody's going to forget to tick a box. Okay. And something that could potentially disastrous could happen. That risk is always high, which is why we always need to make a profit, because if we ever make a catastrophic mistake, we're going to eat that job. And if you're not willing to eat a job that you messed up on, I don't know how you're going to stay in business, because your reputation won't survive making catastrophic mistakes and not making it up to the customer. And I will tell you, I worked at a company where our policy was if the client wasn't happy, we gave them their money back. And that terrifies some people. I can tell you exactly 2 times in 15 years do I know that we did that. And one of them was my client. Fortunately, it wasn't a very big job, but the fact of the matter is they were a pain in the ass. They were going to badmouth us and trash us because they wanted to be upset because they wanted some money back because they made a mistake in buying. It's not because we didn't do exactly what we said it would do. They just chose to have a bad memory. It was easier to give them their money back and take away their ability to have a bully pulpit to say, oh, next time you guys have to do better. No, we gave them the money back and just chose never to do business with them ever again. So the fact of the matter is, it is a powerful tool in your toolbox. There's some times that you probably need to consider doing it. All right. Let me remind you guys, if you got some questions, please put them in the Q&A box at any time. don't forget you've got a chat there to say hello to some folks. Not a huge crowd today, but hey, we are kind of busy, so there's some very important people here though. Let's talk about gross profit. I look at a lot of P&Ls. I look at a lot of job cost statements. I talk about job costs with my clients all of the time. Your gross profit formula is unhelpful in this conversation about cost. And the reason is we all measure gross profit differently. And I'm going to show you some examples here, and you go, well, wait a minute, all of these are right and they're all completely different. Yep. Hello, welcome to my world. So let's take an example where a client has a $6,750 budget and they want that LED wall and it's a slow week. What's this going to look like? All right, let's have some fun. This is what I call sales math. It's not that it's wrong. It's just this is how salespeople usually think because we've given them a retail pricing system with a discount. So that's how they put numbers together. The client has $6,750. How do I make my numbers work for that client? Well, our equipment's very important, and I can't have, I can give them a big discount, but I can't give them too much of a discount. So typically what's going to happen in order to get what should be a $18,000 job down to $6,750, I'm going to put people through and services through at cost. I got $2,000 in labor and $1,000 in logistics. I'm just going to pass those through, and then I'm going to discount the equipment until I get to the magic number. Sound familiar? This is exactly how your rental management software is set up. This is what people do 80% of the time when they're trying to match the client's number. And now the only discussion point we're having internally, salesperson to owner or sales manager, is, hey, I can get to the number, but I need to put a 75% discount. Well, the fact is that's a little white lie because you also discounted talent and logistics completely, right? So the gross profit on this job, the good news is even at these costs, this pricing is still 50 or 6% gross profit. All of the gross profit comes from the equipment, which sounds great. We're a rental company. No, you're not a rental company. The place you should be making profit, you didn't make any profit. But this is not sales' fault. This is an institutionalized approach to pricing that I've been battling for years. All right. Well, looks like I hope I'm not frozen up. I'm just going to keep going like I have not frozen up. All right. Now, getting back over here to what I call operations math. Okay. Operations math is, well, also right, and it's also wrong, but this is how ops looks at it. Everything has a cost. Yeah, it looks like my video is just kind of crapped out. I'm going to kill the video for a second and restart my video engine because, why not? Hey, it's just a show. And we'll come back to that. So give me a second, I'll get back to that. All right, so the ops math on all of this is we know we have this LED wall that's sitting on the shelf not doing anything. As ops, I'm more than happy to prep it for you. To me, there's some cost in preps. So don't discount it 100% because that's kind of insulting to the warehouse crew that all the work they do is free. So let's at least put a little prep fee in there or leave a little bit of money left in there. But please do not take away my profit centers of talent and logistics because my planning team, we're going to book labor, we're going to do sub rentals, we're going to book that truck that we need. All of those things are going to happen, and I don't want to be devalued. Operations is going to do their job. So we're going to get to the exact same number. We're just going to do it differently. And this is also right. This is another way of calculating gross profit that is 100% correct. So now I want to go to owner math. Owner math is also correct because owner math is always correct, right? That's because they're owners. That's the way it works. So looking at the owner math, they hear, well, wait a minute, the client's got $6,750. The gear's sitting on the shelf. I don't need to hire anybody else. We have our own truck. I'll drive the truck if I have to, right? Come on, guys, let's go out and do a show. We're not busy. the owner sees $6,750 in gross profit because all of the costs are tied into overhead they're already paid for. All right, all three of these maths are correct. Okay. Now, what do we do with this information? Look, my point in all of this is that, costs matter, right? They matter a lot. So if costs matter, they also have to be predictable, and costs are predictable. We know what things are going to cost. Let's see if my video is working again. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Costs can be managed, right? Just because we believe that it's going to cost us $2,000 for talent, we might get lucky and actually get to buy at a lower price because maybe they're not busy either, right? So when we go out into the field, but the chances of having to pay more than $2,000 are extremely low. Remember, our risk in talent is medium, our risk in services is medium. Okay? So your costs can be managed, your costs can be optimized across orders. We can look at all the orders in a given period, move our costs around to get the best cost advantage. What if I need an LED technician for the next 3 weeks? Because I'm lucky and I've got LED jobs back to back. Well, maybe I can book that person for 3 weeks at a lower rate. Right? So we don't look at one job at a time. We look at all the jobs and we make the best purchases we can. Yay for planning, right? And all costs can be negotiated, right? It doesn't mean that this vendor has to negotiate. The point is you can negotiate. So the chances of you paying more are pretty low. The chances of you paying less are pretty good. Now, let's talk about that busy season, right? If you know your costs, you can afford to price something based on demand, even if it's months in advance. So if you know months in advance that a particular period is going to be busy, it can affect the way that you price things right now. So now let's do some Tom math. When I look at a budget and I look at a pricing exercise, I always start with talent. I don't need to put the equipment order together to know how many people I need to do the job. There are rare exceptions to this. If you're quoting an arena job and you've never done an arena job before, you're probably going to have to put the gear together before you realize how many people it actually takes to do that show, right? For the stuff that you do every day, you don't even need to do the equipment list. You can just add up the labor, double it, and there's your show price. Estimating's easy, right? So I always start with talent and logistics, right? I've got a cost, which means I have an optimum sell price, and I have a minimum sell price, and I don't deviate because I don't discount. It doesn't matter how slow or busy we're going to be. This is a piece, not your entire order. This is a piece of your order that you really shouldn't have to think about. Get the head count right, get the logistics right, get those costs, travel, and everything in there that it takes to do that job, and leave it alone. Now we can go take a look at the gear that we need. In this case, I've got an LED wall that my cost is 10,000 bucks. I know on a good week I can get that wall for 5,000 bucks. Lots of people negotiate tiles, right? But 10,000 bucks is a reliable replacement cost for me. Ideally, I should sell it at 15. The least I need to sell it for, I love operations. They told me what the number is, 750 bucks, right? So based on the timeline, my price for the LED wall that we own, which is available, is somewhere between $750 and $15,000. Are you with me? Is that a big enough gap for you? Right? So my total cost on this job is somewhere, or price on this job is somewhere between $7,000 and $21,000. Right? That's a huge gap, but trust me, this is a gap that you need to understand. Right? Because if you understand your costs, there are times when you would gladly do this job for $7,000 or $6,750, and you will take it all day long because that's 100% gross profit upon execution. When you're quoting it, you're going to assume some costs. In practice, you're probably not going to have any. So now, how do we figure out which price do I need to be at, 7,000 or 21,000, right? There are times when the client comes to you where you're going to have to be at 21,000 bucks. If you look at this chart here, if you're 6 months out, I can put a 50 to 75% discount on a period where I expect to be busy, but I haven't sold anything yet. I can seed a job in here or 2 jobs. And when 25% of my capacity is gone, I take this option off the table. If I'm 6 months out and I've got 20 and I haven't sold 25% of capacity, I've got some room to discount to get a job on the books. As I get closer, that discount goes down. All right. Or when 50% of my capacity is sold, my discount all but disappears. So once I've sold 50% of my capacity for a given period, and that period is not the month, right? It is that time period. I may have one job that overlaps all the other jobs. Even though the month is not at 50% capacity, that 5-day period is at 90% capacity. That's going to affect the price of that job. That's what I call about stacking. When the jobs stack, okay, that increases your risk. That increases the amount of money that you need to margin, right? That changes what discount you are willing to give off that equipment. Service prices have not changed. This gets interesting. As I get closer to the job, and I know many of you hate last minute jobs, I love them. If I've got 75% of capacity sold and I'm 4 weeks out, I've got a job that I can drop in, sell that job. That is free money. Discount that job if you need to win that job. You can discount that equipment 50%, even if you don't have all the equipment available, even if you have to subrent, because so much of that job is going to go straight to the bottom line because all the profit's built in. It's a free job. It's a freebie. You're putting it right in between all these other jobs. It's using capacity that's available. Now, you get into 1 and 4 weeks out. If I've got a gap, I can pick up a 2-day gig for 25,000 bucks. It's in between jobs. I've got crew available. I've got gear available. I got trucks available. Take that job. It's free money. And if you've got a discount to get it, you can afford to discount it substantially. Now, likewise, if you have nothing going on, you can afford to discount substantially. And do you need to discount something 90% to get a job that's a week out? No, you don't. My point is, you have the ability to do it if you want to make a strategic choice about taking the extra gross profit that's paying down your overhead. And once you've paid off your overhead, it's all going to become net profit. So that last little job, when you're at almost max capacity, is 100% net profit, right? Everything that is gross profit is going to be net profit. So we need to have some sense. Now, is this a perfect chart for you? No, of course it's not. Okay. I want you to understand the idea of how demand is going to fluctuate and affect your price over time. Think about when you're booking hotel rooms. If you want to go to a nice resort next summer when they expect to be busy, right now the price is extremely high. If they have not filled up by June 1, that price is going to come down a lot. As we get closer to that week, the price is going to go back up again because the last 20 rooms they want to sell at retail, right? They don't care if they fill them or not. They're willing to bet that you want to stay there so badly you'll pay retail. So there is a point in time in that 1 to 4 week where you may not discount at all, and you bet that the buyer is so desperate. Again, this is strategic. Are you willing to risk not getting the job versus getting the job and making an extraordinarily high profit? That's a risk assessment. But again, if I don't know what my costs are, I don't know what assessment, I don't know what judgment call I'm making. So some things to keep in mind, all this. You and your suppliers might have completely different busy seasons and weeks. It is not unusual at all. You might be swamped and everybody else in the industry is sitting on their hands, or vice versa. If you're having trouble finding deals in your region, go out of your region and find better deals. Okay. The cost of the deal that you can get somewhere else plus the cost of shipping, if it's better than what you can get locally, do it. Right. If you can not put something on the truck and rent it locally and save truck space, rigging, great. If rigging is cheap where I'm going, let's sub-rent rigging and save the truck space, right? So there's so many things that you can do from a planning standpoint to make sure that you're going to optimize your cost basis for all of your business. Bundle purchases across multiple orders. I do not see this enough. If you need something twice in 1 month, you should have rented it for the whole month, whatever that 4-week period is. Look for jobs. Just put it in your inventory. You have nothing to lose. If you own it, they will come, right? Treat your sub rentals like you own them. Bring them in for a longer period. It is less handling. You're going to get a better deal from your sub rental supplier. It's going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to solve a lot of problems for you. And always keep in mind that your actual costs may vary. But when you work from the concept of replacement costs, the variance is almost always in your favor. So if we never discount the things that we should not discount, like talent, logistics, hard costs, and we know what those costs are and we protect them, we have a lot of wiggle room, okay, in our equipment costs. So don't be afraid of deep discounts. You don't even have to tell your client what you're doing, because that's a whole nother discussion. This is inside math. We'll talk about outside math at the workshop. So seasonality. Seasonality, my final word on this is it is a most likely case scenario. We feel at this time that the most likely case is that we're going to be extremely busy during this period. Therefore, I'm going to respond to opportunities with that risk in mind. Seasonality is also a most likely case scenario that we are not going to be very busy at this time. Therefore, I'm going to quote aggressively because I want to make sure that I have gross profit being generated during that time period. And no matter what you've decided, it's going to change, right? But yeah, the hour did go by fast. So thanks, Steve. So some key takeaways from all this, right? Your ability to source and manage costs is a service to your customers. It allows you to quote a price and honor it, right? It has value, okay? Number two, knowing your costs means that you can predict gross margin, which reveals the value of any transaction in advance. Okay? You're in a much better negotiating position when you intrinsically understand what this job is worth to your business. What it's worth to the customer is the other side of the negotiation equation. In this model, procurement is a core competency. If you're a service-based company, which all of you are, okay, procurement is a core competency. You need to know how to sub-rent equipment. You need to know how to buy supplies. You know how to book labor. You need to have a deep bench on highly qualified technical crew. All of these things are extremely important to your business. It has to be something you're good at. We don't get to mess around, in what I almost said, and get away with this. And then if procurement is good, then you're going to have the cost data available to you that's going to allow you to make strategic pricing decisions as needed, which means you're going to win more of the jobs that you want to win and be confident that you're going to make money when you do it, right? We're going to take a lot of the guesswork out. This is why costs are so very important. So we're going to have some time for some questions. Again, if you can, use the Q&A box. That would be very helpful for me. I've already got a couple questions in here that I would like to get to because they are some very good ones. A couple of quick announcements. Jumpstart Your Selling Engine, Jumpstart Your Sales Engine is in Atlanta, April 3rd and 4th. This is a full day. It's all day on the 4th. The 3rd is a reception. We're going to spend all day getting better at selling. Some of the things that we've talked about today, I'm going to expand into how do we do pricing models? How do we build the right proposals for the right customers? What are the presentation modes that you would show different types of customers to secure these kinds of deals without giving up your pricing math to that customer, which is a huge part of negotiation. So last chance to register. We'd love to have you. I'd look forward to seeing you. Got a great crowd already. So we got Jumpstart. I'm going to have a master class June 11th in Las Vegas, right before InfoComm. We're going to work on strategic growth, master classes for owners and their senior management teams. We're going to work on how we can strategically grow our businesses. We're going to take our balanced model and we're going to 10x it. And I want you to understand how to get from where you are to where you want to be, and all the things that's going to affect and all the things that's not going to affect inside of your scalable business. We will do jumpstart planning. You heard me talk a lot about planning today. You thought a costs webinar was going to be about selling. It's not. It's about selling, planning, and admin. It affects the entire balanced organization. But in Jumpstart in Denver, August 14th and 15th, we're going to focus, do a deep dive on planning. Planning is 60% of your organization. 60% of your people, 60% of your resources, probably 80% of your processes are built in the planning sphere. We're going to talk about what that looks like. The theme for this event is we are going to lose the word operations. Operations is a bad word. It's the wrong word. Operations is not value. Operations is transactional. We're going to talk about planning, which has a huge amount of value for our business. Jumpstart in November. We'll be back in DFW, and we are going to focus again on the admin sphere, but which is really the entire organization. So this will be a great conference for management, for everybody in selling, planning, and administration to understand what their roles are in the company. We'll talk a lot about finance and things like that, organization. We're going to do we'll do some deep dives into some case studies. I'm looking forward to that one as well. We'll have another masterclass in December during LDI because, well, LDI is in December now, so why not go to Vegas again and have another masterclass? The topic on that is to be determined. I'm currently thinking that we're going to revisit the exit strategy and succession planning that we did 2 years ago. Been a lot of developments there. Got some great case studies to share with you. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. So stay tuned for all of that. Monday morning newsletter is in a podcast. You can listen to it on your way into work. It's a readout of the weekly blog post. The Intentional Success podcast comes out every week on Thursday. My books are on Audible. The next webinar, we're going to talk about the perfect proposal, right? That'll be a great thing to bring up right after the selling workshop. It'll make a lot of sense to you. You can take the things that you've learned at the workshop. You can invite the team to watch that webinar with you, and they'll better understand the things that you've been teaching them. It'll help us tie all of that together. So if we haven't chatted before or haven't chatted in a while, you know how to reach me, set up a conversation. I'd love to talk to you about the things that you need to help you in your business, talk about my Intentional Success Club, talk about one-on-one coaching and other things that you might need. So remember, if you want a better negotiating position, then pay attention to your costs. All right, that's going to help you. So I'm going to stop and answer some questions. I'm going to kill the share and just let you look at my big ugly face. And please, if you got some questions, drop them in. Man, people are busy. We're dropping off. Can't have that. I thought I was very entertaining. All right, let me get this first question out of the way. The question is, when do I use my lowest price? And there's another question here that says, what do I do with a buyer that only wants my lowest price? Those are not the same question, but they are close enough. So I'm going to kind of bundle those together because this is about leveraging your calendar, right? Your lowest price is the lowest price that you are willing to do at any given time. So for that given time, if you need to go to the table with your best price, okay, look at the examples I just gave you. Understand what your hard costs are. Know that there's margin built into there. Notice that you may have some other advantages. Do the owner version saying, hey, we're not busy at all. We may not need to use outside labor. We may be able to go out and do a show ourselves instead of outsourcing, which is sometimes we're going to do that. We know how to put together the best price. And is it a 50% discount, 75% discount, a 90% discount? You decide. Take a look at the risk, take a look at the timing, and figure all of that out. Now, when a client only wants your lowest price, you need to take control of this conversation. The lowest price is going to depend on timing. How far out are we talking? During what time period is? Because my lowest price in January may not be my lowest price in October, right? And you've got to make it very, very clear. Well, I want your best deal every time. You can have my best deal every time. It's just not going to be the same deal, right? So the earlier they will commit, the better deal they're going to get. But They're not always going to get the same deal because not every month of the year or every week of the year gives you the same flexibility on pricing. However, if they always book in advance, they're giving you a multi-year contract, they have an advantage because they're going to hit that sweet spot where you're going to discount deeper to preload some jobs into your calendar, and that's worth something to you. So that is a good negotiating position for them. But if they're calling you 3 weeks out and want your best deal, they might be in trouble. In this model, how would you show prices? All right. I know we're all over the map on how we present our proposals, and some of you are generating them out of your rental management system and sending them out there. Maybe you're using line mute, maybe you're using line item, grouping, summaries, whatever it might be. If I am putting my best offer on the table, and I've done the crazy behind the scenes math that we just talked about today, where I'm going to give you the best deal you've ever got, I'm not going to show them any math. I might show them, here's what this job would normally cost, is $21,000. Here's your quote, $7,000. But you have to confirm at this time, you have to pay cash up front, and payment has to be completed at this time. I'm going to put the terms and conditions on there that says, here's how you get that deal. I'm not going to show them how I got to the number, right? Well, wait a minute, I'm not going to pay $1,200 a day for a LED wall technician if you guys aren't busy. We don't want that conversation. That's not a negotiating point. The negotiating point is, here's my best deal. I'll do this job for $7,000. Here's what it would normally cost you. That's the only time I would show prices in a best offer scenario. One more question here, and we are done. Okay. My May is only at 50%, but it's all in the same 10 days. Sound familiar? I won't read the whole thing. The answer to this is capacity refers to the period that the job in question is in. So you may have a 10-day busy period in May, and you may have a job that's either side of those 10 days where you're wide open. Your risk is much lower. You can sell at a much lower price if that's what it takes to win the job. If that job falls into those 10 days, you're going to have to raise your cost expectations. You're going to have to increase your margin because your risk is going to go up. You're not going to be able to give somebody a really great deal in those 10 days, but look at how much capacity you have left. If you're at 90% capacity, it's going to be more difficult to pull that job off. And so you're probably going to stick to your pricing to a higher price if you can. But again, it's not about the month. It's about the period that the job in question is happening. We're pricing one job at a time. We're delivering all the jobs together through planning. Guys, thank you. It's been great. Glad to see you. Thanks for joining the webinar and sticking with me. Tell all your friends, and I will see you in 2 weeks at Jumpstart.